My session is Introduction to CRMScript, and Tony tasked me with presenting the basics and the syntax of CRMScript. So for some of you, this will be probably way too basic, but hopefully starting from scratch, we can get all of you along. So my name is Hans Wilhelmsen. I know a lot of you from before, but I work in SuperOffice right now as an online operations administrator, which means on a daily basis I don't use CRMScript that much as I used to, but I did used to use it on a fairly daily basis. I've worked in SuperOffice for almost 8 years, and I have a background as a teacher, and before SuperOffice I worked as a teacher, so hopefully that can aid me in being slightly better teacher today. The agenda for this session is an introduction and setting the expectations, getting an overview, and presenting some of the use cases, giving you some live examples, or well, they're pre-prepared, but they're still live. And finally, the most important aspect of any programming language is having some good resources to use and look through for either guides or just ask questions and get them answered by professionals. And finally, hopefully, we have some time for questions in the end. I started the introduction before the slides, but hopefully none of you are expecting nothing and you're still let down. That would be sad. But we will start at the basics, and hopefully we'll teach some of you something. So let's get a quick overview of what CRMScript is and where it all started. So EJScript was born on Christmas Day 2004. So EJScript is actually newly a teenager, 13 years old, almost 14. And it was created by a man sitting over there called Sverre Hjelm. Hand in the air. Yeah. It's a mastermind. And according to Sverre, the syntax resembles C, C++, and Java. But if you ask me, and if you use a text editor, it's usually I usually use for syntax highlighting. I use JavaScript because you can embed a lot of HTML into the code. So it consists of roughly 13,000 lines of code. Did it start that way, Sverre? How big was the first version?
I guess the first running version was a couple of hundred lines.
Yeah.
You couldn't do that much. No.
So it's expanded through the years, and it's still expanding. It's what we call a recursive descent as an interpreting and parsing technique. It's the way the code is executed between the applications, or is that a good way of calling it, Sverre? Well, like between server side and client?
Well, yeah, it's an embedded language, so the recursive descent part is really just how it analyzes the text and understands what the code wants to do.
There are currently around 850 exposed functions, and in addition to the entirety of the NetServer API, which is even bigger. And I'll just go through some quick use cases. These aren't direct examples, but more like an overview of what kind of use cases we have for CRMScript. The first one I like to call customization, and there you have customizing the screens, the screens and the pages you interact with when you use service. These screens you can put a lot of CRMScript into and put all sorts of logic I'll get back to that later. Then you have the customer center, which is the customer-facing part of the application. This part of SuperOffice can also be manipulated by CRMScript. And you have the menus inside the service application. And finally, you have the business logic, where you can decide who gets to see what, or what happens when something is triggered. Then you have the automation aspect of it, which is everything from handling emails, incoming emails, creating scheduled tasks, or executing actions on events or triggers. And then you have the final one, which is like you just sit there or play around and try scripts, or you just want to execute the script once and just do something specific, single usage scripts. You can create your own script libraries, or you can use it for debugging. So I'll head straight into our SuperOffice developer environment, and I've prepared some, starting at very basic, some hello world examples. I'll have to hold on. Duplication. There we go. So I'll actually go a step back to show you where this is located, just in case you haven't seen it before. So this is the SuperOffice service. I'll just go to dashboard. This is your regular SuperOffice service, and as long as you're an administrator and you have sufficient licenses, it's usually the expanded tools license, you will have the option to go to system design and go to CRMScript. CRMScript is available, but without expanded tools as well, but then you won't have the scripts, you only have the macros, if I'm not wrong. So let's have a look at the syntax. As you can see, we have an integrated syntax highlighter and text editor. It's based on CodeMirror. Is that right? Yeah. Which is a web-based text editor. It has some really nice built-in functions. I'll show a bit later. But it's as you can see, you can just start programming or scripting directly into the browser and save it in. It works. You don't need to have a local installation of an IDE or a text editor. But as you saw yesterday, some of you probably, I think showed you the Visual Code plugin, where you can download all of these scripts from directly from SuperOffice service installation and work with them in Visual Code, which is kind of neat. I was kind of planning to show it to you, but as well, and use it in this demo, but I've had limited time being sick with the flu, so yeah, I dropped that. Anyway, as you can see, the syntax is probably familiar to most of you. If I run the script, we have the print line, which will print a line with hello world. Additionally, you can assign or you can create a string called hello and assign the text hello world to it, and then print the string. Or you can be really strange, and you can output all of it as a byte array and convert it into a binary, and it will look like this. So the first two are presented by regular hello worlds. And the last one will look like this. As you can see, there's a lot of ways of doing something, and we'll probably focus on doing it the simplest ways today. I just wanted to show you a really stupid example. So let's have a look at the variables of CRMScript. They're very similar to a normal programming language, but I figured that if this is basic, we'll have to show them anyway, so we can see how you assign stuff and how you work with them in SuperOffice or service. You have the regular string, where you can assign the string with your apostrophes. You have the integers, you have the booleans, the true or false, and you have the float variables. There's might be more as well, but I figured I won't go through all the way. In this example, you could try printing these all these variables created above, but the text editor and the CRMScript language is capable of giving you error messages and pointing you to where it actually happens. So in order to get this one to work, we'll have to fix the variables so they're actually text in the end. So as you can see, the string variable, the s, is left alone because it's already text. And then we're on the integer, which is number. We'll have to make the string out of it. So we'll use the function on the integer class called toString. We'll do the same on Boolean, even though that's not something you do very often. You use Boolean variables to just check if something is true or false. And on float, you also have the same, but you have to set the amount of decimals, which is 1. So if I run this one, hold on. There you go. So it outputs the text instead of giving an error message. When it comes to strings, you have the, now I created the string above, here, and then I reuse the name of the string, which is s, and assign it a new text. So this is new text. Additionally, I can either subtract or add something to it by using the programming assignment method plus equals. But you can also use the...
Could you increase the font size slightly?
The font size? Better?
Yeah.
Yeah. Need better glasses. Nobody else complained. Then you have the... then on the string object, you also have the a function called append, which is actually faster if I'm not wrong, but there's multiple ways of manipulating a string. If you have other strings, like the string s2, which I call it, and the string s3, you can just merge them all together by assigning the s string, the s2 string, and the s3 string together into a new s string. So the s string will no longer contain the new text, but it will contain the text of all of them. So it will look like this. A lot of incomprehensible gibberish. Looking at integers, we'll continue working with our I integer, which you can just assign the same way, but you don't use the apostrophes. The same way you can add or subtract with strings, you can do obviously the same with integers. In this case, I subtract 319 from the I integer. I create 2 more integers, and I use the modulo mathematical operation, which you can find in most programming languages, which gives you a rest, or the reminder, sorry. In this case, you'll have 101 divided by 10 gives you 1 reminder. And then you plus the 2 from the 2 above, and you get, or we should get, 3, I think. Just showing you that the regular programming functions works fine just in CRMScript as well. So, some basic variables there. And I'll head over to some logic, and you can see how that looks in CRMScript. In this case, I see I've only used the, or I haven't used the curly brackets, but from a lot of programming languages, you're probably accustomed to using, hold on. Edit mode is, you remove that at some point. So I'm accustomed to just editing right away. So there we go. So this is fine as well. Does exactly the same. It's just that if you're doing an if, else, or else if, you can just jump one line down, and you don't have to use the curly braces. So just really quick programming lesson here. Did I do it? Oh, there's a curly brace. If I run this one, I get first name checks out. Nothing is true when up here. I haven't after my last edit. Sorry. So if we create a new variable called check, and we set it to true. And if check is true, which it is, we will print true. If it's false, it will print false. So it printed true. Then we create a string called Hans Wilhelmsen, and we use some logic on, and additionally we use a function on the stream object called begins with, and one called ends with, and we're checking if, and these returns a Boolean value, either false or true. So if the name string begins with Hans, it will print first name checks out. If the name string ends with Wilhelmsen, it will print last name checks out. And else if name equals Super Hans Wilhelmsen Office, we won't get error if any of the previous ifs are true. And then finally, if nothing of the above checks out, we'll get if nothing is true, we end up here. So as you can see, you can use multiple ifs, or you can use if and then else if, but if I do like this, to get the last one. So, and if we want to get the no, the second to last one, sorry. Now nothing is true. So as you can see, this is fairly similar to what you're probably accustomed with programming language you've used before, if you have used a programming language before. As I mentioned at the beginning, there's probably some of you who think I'm going way too fast because you're new to programming languages, and there's people who can't wait to get to the more interesting stuff, but we'll go from A to Z. So looking at the loops in CRMScript, we have both the while loop and the for loop. We don't have any others, do we, Sverre? No. And they both have their use cases, but I think it's a bit of what you feel most comfortable with. In this case, for just printing out 1 to 10, it's obviously a lot quicker to use the for loop. While the while loop is a bit longer. I usually use, I think that's Sverre's fault, but I usually use the while loop for going through or iterate through result set or an array or search engine, for example. In this case, I created a while loop, which as long as it's true, I could have also said that as long as the I integer is less than 10 or something, it will be true. And I want to print out the I and set it to a string and add a space. I should probably jump out over local teams. If I is larger than 10, it will break. So as you can see, you can use the break in the while loop. Can you do that in a for loop as well, the break? Or is that only for while?
Answer.
That's good. Then I just do a print line to split them up. You can, just a quick example while I'm thinking about it. It's you have the print as well. If I do like this, print test and print test, that's 2. These 2 first tests will come on the same line. As long as you use print line, it will do a line break for you. So it will just start on a new line. And then the for loop, you create a variable and set it to a number usually. And you set a threshold or limit, or at some point you want to stop it. And then you want the increment, which you're probably used to from using for loops from before. And for every time it runs once, it will print out the I integer to a string and add \n, which represents line break. You can see this one will give us the following result. You can do, as long as I just increase these, they will just be bigger. And the use cases for working with this is obviously iterating through a lot of data, or going through some numbers, or even adding stuff. And let's look at some functions. So, as with other programming languages, you are capable of creating your own functions in CRMScript, which is very handy. At some point, you probably want to reuse your code, and there's no better way of doing that than by doing or creating your own variables. So, in a long piece of work or a lot of code, there's probably some stuff you want to do several times. You don't want to type it out every single time. You just want to call a function and perhaps pass some arguments to it, or parameters. So you have the first example of a function, which is, not sure if you know the void, but it just means that it won't return anything. It can do something, but it won't return anything to the if you try to pass it to a string or something, then you won't assign anything to it. But this one will just be the same as typing out edit mode. So the first function will be exactly the same as typing print doing stuff. It's just that instead of typing that, we can now just type do stuff, and we'll do the same. Then you have, in some cases, you want to return a variable. For example, if I wanted to return text. So if I wanted to create a string x world, and then assign it to the result of a variable, so return text. I could do this instead of with the previous one, do stuff. This wouldn't work because it gave us a void. And then you have the example of passing some parameters. And when you create the function, you assign how many, or as many variables as you want, and they don't have to be the same type. You can obviously make it take both a string parameter and an integer and boolean or whatever. And then you reuse those parameters inside the function. And when you want to call the function, you use the function, takes parameters, and you pass a string for the first one and a string for the second one. And it should output my name with, or it should print the first name, space, and the second name. And final example of function is that you can also pass objects into the parameters. This use case probably isn't that great, but I just wanted to show you anyway. In this case, I create a check ticket function, which takes a ticket object, not a normal string or integer. But let's say I create a ticket, and the variable is called R, and then I pass the function load on the ticket object, and say that I want to load ticket with ID 2. Now the R object is loaded with information from ticket, the ticket object, and I want to call a function check ticket and pass the ticket object into it. So inside the check ticket function, I can now use the, as you can see, in this case it's called T, in this case it's called R, but that's because inside the function I would just use the name of the variable inside the creation of the function. So in this case it will pass it will use the get value function on the ticket, and it will try to get the value called title. I'll get back to these named get values and other similar things a bit later. It's accessible through our SDK, and you can find or not only the SDK actually. I'll show you right now. Just remember that I forgot to show. So the SDK is luckily available to us through IntelliSense, or so I thought. Wait, I know why. It's probably not on, should be available there. So if I do the same here. Oh. Why isn't it working, so?
Right now it looks like maybe
there we go. Yeah, focus or something. I'm sure. Anyway, yeah, you can push the magical button with ID 2. So let's look at the holy grail of CRMScript, which is search engine. It's a very powerful tool of looking into or finding things that are inside of the database of service and sales, and it kind of works like a glorified SQL query. It's a little way of creating your own queries to look into the system, or manipulating the system by updating or inserting or deleting stuff. So it's very powerful. So the first example is a very tungvint. It's a very it's a slow way of doing a search or outputting, creating a search engine. As you can see here, you have it's the old way. It's I've created a search engine object, and then I use the object to add the fields I want to see from the database. In this case, I want to see from the ticket table, and I want to fetch the ID created at owned by, title, and status columns from the database. If some of you saw Sverre's keynote yesterday, you probably saw that he introduced something new and fancy, which makes it a lot quicker, which I think a lot of both you and me are happy about. But if you want to do it a lot simpler, you can do it like this. Search engine object, and then you add the ticket table, and then you just call the add fields instead of add field function on it, and say that you want these columns instead of adding 5, 6 more rows. And finally, that's what I introduced yesterday, you have the new execute HTML table function, which just gives you a really nice, well, is it HTML? No. Nice output to look at your data. So, yeah, sorry. So this is Sverre's method. Look really great. Currently there are only 4 tickets inside the system. But the old school way, just because it's a good way of learning, it's without some heavy tinkering and assigning some HTML, it will look something like this. It's basically the same, but a lot more work for a lot less pretty output. Hold on, I think it will look prettier if I do like this. Yeah. So you can see there's always advancements to CRMScript as well. So introducing new functions to make your lives easier. Just quickly saying what happens here is that after I get the after I specify which table and columns I want to fetch, I call the execute function on the search engine object, which will then tell the system to fetch all the rows that correspond to what I just wrote. And my result set, I loop through using a while loop. And as long as the search engine object is not end of file, meaning it's not at the bottom or it's not finished looking through it, I will print out each line, and then I will, after I've printed out the line, I will say jump to the next line. So if I don't call this, which I've done 1,000 times, it will just loop through the first row forever, and it will just hang. You'll probably do it a couple of times yourself. So, and as you can see, you can do exactly the same using a for loop. Instead of the while loop, you can do the for select as long as it's not the end of the file, and call the next. So, I don't know if it's there's a shortcut in CodeMirror for commenting out everything, or not everything, but all the line selector or something.
No.
No. Then you have the an example of using search engine for updating. So now I created a new search engine object called, which I call U. Then I add a field called ticket ID, and a criteria, which is another function which lets you specify exactly which columns and rows you want. No, rows. And then you say that on the ticket ID column, I only want the row with number 2. And as you can see, this one takes hold on, sorry, add criteria. This one takes, or it can take several different amounts of parameters. So you can either pass 1, 2, 3, 4 strings and 1 integer, or you can pass 5, 6 strings and 1 integer, or you can just pass 3 strings. They all do slightly different things. But in this case, as you can see, even though I want to look at the ID of the number, I pass a string with the parentheses. No parentheses, it's apostrophes. And say I want to take ID 2. And then finally I say that I want to add data. And I want to, for the ticket.title, I want to set it to new and updated title. And finally I pass the, or call the function update on the object. And it will set the title to new and updated title. If I didn't have the row above, what do you think would have happened? Anyone?
Everyone would change.
I would have changed the title of all the tickets to new and updated title, which is not really fun. It's not my idea of fun, at least it's not something I do on Saturday night at home. Yeah, you have bulk updates, so you have the tools available for you in the sales client as well, but yeah. And then you have the same, but you have for adding data, so insert. So same stuff, just search engine I call A, add data to it, ticket ID 56, and then I want to set the title to broken ticket, and then I insert the row directly into the database. So what happens here is that I create a row in the ticket table, and with the title broken ticket and ID 58. Now what happens is that if you create some bad data, it will look like this. Because it's broken and it gives me an error message. Case here is that our user interface, when it fetches the ticket, it expects a lot more data than just the ID and the title. So, because we created a really stupid ticket, we might want to delete the same ticket, in which case I can add a criteria where I want to go to the ticket table, the ID equals 56, and then I want to delete it. Never mind, 58, thanks. Wouldn't have been a disaster here because nothing happened. Anyway, so as you can see now, it should be gone. So in some cases, people have filters or some automation for incoming tickets, and something weird happens, and the system creates a blank ticket. This happens once in a while for customers, and they complain that we have blank tickets, and whenever we click it, it's broken, and they wonder if it's their fault, if it's something they can do or whatever. And in this case, you can just run the script because you can't actually go into the ticket and manually delete it because the system won't let you. So that's a quick run through of search engine. How much time do I have actually? Anyone know where this is supposed to be done? Is it 1/4 past?
You have 15 minutes.
15?
15.
Perfect. So, this is, now we're getting more into SuperOffice land. We have, just like creating the string objects and the search engine objects, you have other classes which you can create objects from, called ticket, message, customer, company, and you have a plethora of other classes. But I decided to just focus on a few of them, which are probably the most used, or at least the best examples in this case. So I just started off by creating these 4 objects. Currently they have no content. So what I do here is that I create a new search engine, and I say that I add fields on the table EJ message, ID and ticket ID. I limit it to 1, and then I set the order of the message ID to false. That means just descending. So in this case, I just want 1 row from the EJ message table, and I want the ID to be descending, so I want the last EJ message. And this I want because I want to find the I want the information on just 1 line in the EJ message table. So what I do is that I use the ticket object, and now I want to load an actual ticket into it. So what I do is I use the search engine object, which I just created above, and execute it, meaning the search engine actually has data in it. And then I say that I want the EJ message.ticket ID from that row I got up here. And I want it to be an integer, so I can load it, because the load function on these objects takes an integer, not a string. So now I loaded the ticket object with the ticket number of the last message in the message table, which contains all the messages of the tickets. So further on, I can use the I can go into the customer object and reuse the ticket object to get the value of the ticket object called cust ID. And I want to make that into an integer so I can load it again. So now I have the customer connected to the ticket of the last EJ message inside, or the message inside the system. And then I can go into the company and do exactly the same. So now I have a company that got its information from the customer, that got its information from the ticket, that got its information from the last message. This is a really stupid example. I just want to show you that they're all kind of connected, and you can reuse the object. And then finally, I want to print the output. I want to print the company's value called name. So as you can see, it's very script. As you can see, I can call name, which will give me the name of the company. Which was SuperOffice Software Limited, which is the first company inside the system, I think. Then you have the user object as well, which you can use to work with users inside SuperOffice, people working with the system. And I just wanted to add this one because it's really handy when you're working with business logic, for example. In some screens or pages, you want to check out who the person who is accessing the page is. In which case, you can create a user object, and you don't actually have to do that either, but you can call this alone, and it will give you the ID of the or the person currently loading the page. So the cool thing about this number is that was it this way?
Gives you a user object.
So I have to do. Yeah, I won't spend too much time with that. Anyway, I can use the U and then get the get value and get the name of or the ID of the user, and which gives me in turn a number, which I can use to check if this number is part of a group or just a specific person, and then allow him to do something or disallow him to do something. So for example, I'll show you an example now. you can create. You also have something called system scripts. So you have something called main menu, which manipulates the menu in SuperOffice. I won't go too much into detail in this, but because there's not that much time left, but you can all have it afterwards. So I'm just getting the main menu object and the element, and then I add a group to it, and then I check if the active user and the get value of the active user is 2, which is my user ID. I think, no, maybe it's 1, but then I add an item to the group I've created and another item, which does not check if my ID is 2. So I click OK. OK. You can see I just added a group to the left page. And I get 1 and 2. So if I check if I'm user 3 instead, I only get a 1, which is a good way of just making sure you're the correct person to see this thing. This can be implemented into pretty much everywhere in SuperOffice service. I also want to show you the map object, which is really nice of storing as an alternative to an array, which it's a lot. I don't have a really good analogy, but it's a map object where you can insert value or a key and a value. So, for example, I have a map where I have the first key called first name, and I assign the value to first name to be Hans. Then I do the same for last name and the same for age. I'm 33. And then finally, the map object has a cool function called toJSON, which just takes the newly created map object and outputs it as a JSON, so you can easily work with it in other systems or REST objects or REST or whatever. So it will look like this. And you can also call variables on the map object and just get a specific value of a key. So I can, for example, say m dot hello. As you can see, there's a shortcut in service which gives you a quick search, just like Mac, but as long as you're inside this editor, it will be the IntelliSense. So on the map object, I just want to get the value of a key, for example. You can do a lot of things with maps, and it's a good way of creating and storing data. Finally here, we have the something which can be nice to get your scripts a bit smaller. You have perhaps created your own script just called script library, where you have added a lot of functions which you want to reuse. In which case you can use the following line where you say you include, and then you include the name or the include name of the script. I'll show you. So you see, the only script with an include name is the functions. And what's a bit funny here is that this example will show you something that is perhaps not that good, because you can also use the include to just add a lot of code, which makes it like a global script instead of a script library. What it does is just gives you the entire functions script and adds it into this script. So if I run this one, it will try to pass the parameters to the text parameters function we created earlier, but it will also output all the different stuff I printed, which were outside a function earlier. You can see there's a lot of gibberish. So if you want to include stuff, it's usually for the best to keep it into functions, so you're able to call it, because it's really hard to work with for consultant that arrives after another consultants to start working with stuff that just, it's hard to keep track of. So, I'll show you quickly a couple of more things. Quick here. It's there's something in SuperOffice called screen choosers, which is it's a lot of regularly used links or buttons inside service where you can, for example, if you click new request or if you click the status screen, let's say new request, you might want to check if they are someone with the get active user I showed you earlier. And then if they're a specific user, I want to set variable URL, and then I want to say that I want to go to get program. Get program works, or is it get program logic? Oh, no, get program works.
Get program logic.
Plus the stuff after get program logic, which will redirect them. Get program logic will give you a string that looks like this. And then if you have a script that you want to execute, you can just pass it after do script and ID equals 2, which will execute ID 2. But perhaps you only want if get active user dot get value ID equals 2. Only then I want to show him this specific screen. So if it's someone else than active user 2, then he will use the regular screen instead of being redirected to another screen. So you have this possibility for probably not all, but most of the buttons inside service. And I'd just like to show you inside screens, because you can create your own screens. As I showed yesterday, you can. There's a new and improved screen editor. Hold on. I don't want to have to create my own right now. So normally, do not do what I'm doing. At least don't start editing, because what happens is that if you start editing the default system screens, you will have a rough time once a new version comes along, because it will see that, oh, this one's been tampered with, so I want updated. Anyway, as you can see here, this is your regular screen. And for the screen, you can actually do a lot of fancy things. Like, this is what happens when you create a script. There's a ticket object, and if the ticket is larger than 0, meaning that it's an existing ticket, it will load the new ticket item. And this is what happens before set from CGI, after set from CGI. Sverre can probably say exactly what that means. When is set from CGI?
It's kind of a complicated issue, but basically when you're showing a screen in the system, there are different times during the rendering of the screen that you can hook into here. And basically before and after depends on whether all the components have had their values initialized or not. Honestly, it's not easy to explain in a short phrase. It gives you different timings through the rendering of a screen, depending on what you want to do.
Exactly.
You would choose one or the other.
So I think this one has, additionally, in some screens you have buttons like OK or Cancel. And For the quick edit ticket screen, you have an OK button, which contains a script. As you can see here. If you wanted to, you could duplicate the quick reply, was that? I think it's a quick reply. Screen and create your own version of it. And then you can perhaps add some controls, like checking if value has been set before they're allowed to click OK, or if they click OK with a certain value, you want to add some things that the person hasn't actually decided himself, but it just does it magically. Yeah, I think that's it for my basic course. Really quickly at the end. Whatever. So the most important thing of starting to learn CRMScript is obviously using your resources correctly. I mean, I started from scratch, and the first one wasn't available when I started, but the built-in intelligence that I showed you, the control space, which allows you to press create an object or just look for a global function and look through it directly inside the text editor. We also have the SDK, which is available on community or DevNet, all DevNet, where you can find all of the the service classes and global functions. And community DevNet as a forum is just amazing for learning, finding guides, finding questions, asking questions, and you will get replies from probably some of the people here, me, Sverre, etc. And it's definitely a way of learning. If you're unsure about something, just ask a stupid question. It's probably been asked before, but might be that we'll be able to help you out directly on the forum as well. So yeah, that's it for my basic CRMScript. Are there any quick questions just before you all boo at me? No? Perfect. Crystal?